I've learned a new word today, okay, which is a word which will be very familiar to you. It's Dundonian. So you're our first Dundonian. So that's an honour which will always be yours. Thanks a lot for talking to us. The last time we met, there's no way on earth you'll remember this, but it was probably 1993. It was at Red Dragon FM in Cardiff, and you were off to play, I think, at the Motor Point Arena, if I'm right, that night. You had a gig that night.
Done a lot of those gigs back then.
And we had
when I was doing my solo.
Yeah. And you were just off to do a gig, and I think you had a guitar case with you, if I remember. But I really enjoyed meeting you, and you know, I know you've done amazing things. When I was in radio, I interviewed quite a lot of people, sort of thing, you know, at Cardiff. You know, I'm no star or anything else, but certain people I connected with, and I felt like I connected with you. I just felt we had a really. I remember the conversation we had. We talked about a whole bunch of things. And I was saying to Tony before, something like Gary Christian springs to mind. Those kind of people with that kind of integrity is it's nice, you know. We kind of had a good chat.
I just sent Gary Christian a message this week.
Oh, did you?
You see, he made a post, you know, with all the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
And he made a post that was really beautiful, you know, and I just had to send him a message. But and I kind of said that the Christians had kind of stood for, right from the beginning, that stood for fairness and equality and peace. You know, all these things are in their music, you know.
Yeah, you did a gig recently at a place called the Acapella, which would be a lovely venue for you, actually, if you wanted to play and get out and do it. Well, at some point, yeah. It's a converted chapel, though. It's a beautiful, like Welsh chapel, if you know what I mean. It's kind of really kind of nice. And the Christians played there recently, and when they were playing, they had the videos from the hits running across on a big screen in the background. And I didn't actually notice at the time. I just thought they were great songs. I was quite naive. I didn't notice how political some of those songs actually were, you know.
So yeah, very much so.
Like Forgotten Town and this kind of stuff, you know.
Hooverville and
yeah. But we're talking about politics. I think I'm right in remembering this. You said something to me which I'd never heard before, and I mentioned this to my 6'8" brother-in-law the other day, and he loved this. So I hope it's true. I hope I remember it correctly. I talked to you about Elvis Costello, and we talked about Tramp the Dirt Down. And I'm sure you're the guy, Gary, who said to me about how it links to "Isn't She Lovely?"
Yeah, I can't remember that because it's a long time ago. But was that a musical link?
Yeah, I think what you said. If you listen to it, I'd never noticed it.
Much pressure in my head, so I'm sure it was me that said it. But it's, you know, you're going back someday.
No, I wonder if you remember that kind of thing about the connection between those two different songs and the way that it kind of nods towards "Isn't She Lovely" in a song of kind of bile, you know, really clever songwriting stuff. Okay, as you say, a long time ago. Early days in Dundee, your early days in Dundee, sort of growing up and getting into music. What were your kind of recollections about those days when you first started getting a love for it?
I think I was just one of those from when I was a kid. Music was just my obsession. You know, I can remember hearing the radio in my mum's kitchen and the Beatles being on and stuff. You know. Just the love of music. But my dad loved jazz and swing, so that was always on around the house. And my mum liked more kind of 60s pop and singers like Barbra Streisand, but she had things like Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, and you know, it was quite an eclectic mix of music. But then I was from a kind of Irish Catholic family, and we would all get together for parties, whether it was a birthday or a New Year's celebration or whatever, and part of that was everybody would sing. So there was the kind of live element of music, and the way music kind of touches people very directly. I think, you know, people would laugh and cry and get really, you know, and there was just people standing up and singing. There was very seldom instruments. My granddad had like a little button accordion that he would play for some songs, but the connection between the song and people's feelings, I think, that kind of struck me really early on from that stuff. You know.
What's the age difference with your brother?
He's 5 years younger than me. I've got a twin, actually. But,
all right.
But he's not in music. Well, he kind of is. He has a venue here. I mean, they're having a lot of problems with this COVID stuff. But
yeah, of course.
The brother who was in the band with me, Kit, is 5 years younger than me. Yeah.
So he was the young one, was he? He was the youngster.
Well, I went to London for about 3 years, chasing the dream and the record deal and stuff. I left Dundee when I was 19, and so
Okay.
he would have been 14 or something
Wow.
at school at that time when I left.
Yeah.
And then when I came back, he had his own band, and I was like, oh wow, he's really come on leaps and bounds, you know.
Yeah.
And I could hear that he was really he was influenced by the stuff that I was listening to and the stuff that I was doing, but he also kind of had his own vibe and his own skills as a songwriter, and a quirky kind of way with words. And I kind of helped his band a bit at rehearsals, and I sometimes got on and played keyboards with him and stuff. And then when we got back from London, our drummer almost immediately left. And he ended up later, he actually ended up in the band Delamitri, but
Okay.
he left, and he left. So he basically left Jed and I to go like, what are we doing? And I said, what are we getting my kid brother in? So we did that, and we had a dep drummer, or a couple of different dep drummers actually. But one gig that we did in Edinburgh, there was a music journalist there, and by this time I'd kind of really found a lot of the songs that went on to be on the first Danny Wilson record. I'd kind of written a lot of them by this time. I'd sort of found my direction and sound and stuff. And there was a music journalist in this pub in Edinburgh, and he wrote this glowing review that went into NME, and that's what kind of kicked the whole record company stuff off, you know. But,
so that's interesting, Gary. So you went to, as I remember, you went to London, sort of chasing it because that's where it all was. Yeah. And it was by going back to Dundee that it sort of worked in reverse, and you had to go back to London to sign the deal, I suppose, did he?
Yeah. Ended up kind of living back in London again. Certainly we had a rental flat by the second album. I mean, London was where the music business was, and where everything was. Like, if you want to do Top of the Pops, you had to go to London. And the first year or something, we were just like ping pong balls. I was probably flying backwards and forwards 3 times a week. And then eventually we just said, look, instead of this amount of money that you're spending in hotels, can we just get an apartment? Yeah. And we had an apartment for the next couple of years until the band split up, really. So
I think in this,
and that's because I lived in America for 12 years. But like a flat.
Yes, of course. Did you enjoy living in London? Did you like London as a place to be? Because I must say myself, I never quite connected with it. If I compare it to where I'm in Cardiff, doesn't grab me. There's not where I want to be, sort of thing.
Well, it's interesting because I was just saying, I lived in America. I lived in L.A. for 12 years in 2 different sections. And one of my really close friends, Lauren Christie, who's a songwriter, she moved there a bit, actually, no, in between my 2 times, but had a lot of success. And she loves L.A., and I never connected with L.A. Whereas I love London, and I have had thoughts about that. And I do wonder if it's where you make those breakthroughs, the place that you make those career breakthroughs mean so much to you that you connect a lot more with the place, you know. And London for me has done a lot of good for my, you know, music career, really. A lot of good people that I've worked with there, from musicians to publishers. Yeah.
I mean, I was busy when I went back and forth to London. I was busy getting rejected by record companies. That's the difference, you see.
Well, that backs up my theory.
So, slightly different feel about it. In the song in Davey, of course, you're talking about moving to London in that song, if I remember. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, could you want to give us a little insight into that song?
So that song is quite interesting. There's a side story to that song that I think is quite interesting. But that was written in that batch of songs, including Mary's Prayer and stuff, when I was living in the squat in London. So it was between when I was 19 when I moved, and I think I was about 20. I was 24 when we made the first record, so I must have been, 23. And Davey was one of the earlier ones written. It's kind of a breakthrough song for me, actually. It was one of the ones that I sort of felt I was finding my own feet and my own voice and stuff. And it really was what I was kind of trying to do, was write a song from the perspective of the people that I had left.
Oh, yeah.
Scotland,
Yeah.
So I was kind of singing through their voice, like singing to Davey. But Davey, in many ways, was me. But it was also like uncles that had left to go to Canada or whatever. You know, it's a very common thing in Scotland that people leave when they're young, and Ireland as well. You know?
Yeah.
Um,
And Wales too.
Yeah, you know, and it's to go and make your fortune, kind of. It's the Dick Whittington laugh.
Yeah, yeah. The pavements with gold and all the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I sort of included a lot of that in the song. But
Yeah.
the one thing in that song that I was really aware of at the time, I remember it being in the flat, and it sort of speaks a lot to what we're talking about now about equality, whether it's race equality or sexual equality. And I was really aware of when I wrote the line, I love you, Davey, that it was a man singing I love you, Davey, to a man.
Okay.
And I wanted it to be a universal kind of message of love rather than, you know, I didn't try to hide it anyway or say, or put it was family in it or anything like that, because I deliberately meant it like that. And many, many years later, I was living in Los Angeles, and I got, through social media, contacted by a guy who's become really one of my closest friends in the world now, who's a writer and director and producer for television there. And he basically was saying, I'd love to meet you, and I'm coming to London soon. And I said, I'm actually not in London, I'm in Los Angeles. So he and my wife and I met up, and he took us around the set for his TV show, which was Grey's Anatomy, a big TV show, you know, and we watched them shooting the last episode of a scene and stuff. And then we went for dinner. And he told me that as a young gay kid growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that line had meant so much to him.
Wow.
And that was amazing to sort of, whatever it is, 24, 30 years or something later, to go, actually, it did, what I was doing actually got out there, you know, and it really speaks to the power of music and lyrics. And
well, that's just, for a songwriter, that's just wonderful, you know.
Mm-hmm. No,
for
really.
you, that must have meant the world, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my closest friends. Really.
Lovely. Yeah, that's just a really nice story. I suppose I would have seen it in the song in a slightly different way. I didn't see that, you know, that's kind of almost like a subliminal message, I suppose, within it, when you picked up on that, which is, you know, which is great, really. Mm-hmm. But there's a thing with so many of your songs, you know, we're all kind of interested in. And with some of my very best friends, Tony, one of my oldest friends, we played in bands back in the 80s. The two guys have played with bands back in the 80s. We're still doing it, by the way. But, you know, we love your songs. Actually, a guy who used to play guitar in our band before Tony was a guy called Colin Flynn, who's currently living in Bali. And he wanted to ask you about the solo on The Girl I Used to Know. Because he wanted to know, when did you play that solo, I guess? Yeah. So because it's his favorite guitar solo, okay? And he wants to know, did you have a lot of takes at it, or was it just one angry blitz bang? It was there.
With solos, I tend to try to work out a little map in general in solos. So I would have kind of worked out, right, I want to do this and I want to go here and there, but then the rest of it's kind of completely free and there's a lot of room to move inside that. But I would have known that I was going to start with that fast kind of riff, if I can remember that thing. That's how it goes. But the rest of it, especially the mad bit at the end, that's just me thrashing. That's pure chance.
There's kind of a bit of both then, in that way, isn't it, I suppose?
Exactly, yeah.
Did you get yourself in sort of an angry mood for it, or was you know, did you just play fast?
I was angry. I think if it is expressing my inner squiggle.
Tony, I knew you wanted to ask a couple of questions about particular songs too, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many questions, really. The first and second album, but there was also rumours that there was a third album around about the time that you sort of split up. Was any of those sort of songs completed? Are they lying on the shelf somewhere, or did it not get that far?
Well, it got quite far. There were demos. So kind of part of the reason the band split relates to that, in the sense that what had happened is Jed and Kit had started to write a lot more and they wanted to contribute a lot more. Now, of course, what that meant is, because on the first album I wrote all the songs, what that meant was that I was going to have to diminish what I was doing. And, you know, I didn't hear a lot of their songs. I had a couple of demos from Kit and stuff, but I remember having a meeting and Jed saying, I've written 10 songs or 14 or whatever it was, and Kit saying, I've written 32 songs or whatever, and I'm going like, what is it going to be, like a quadruple album, you know? And I just, like, that was one of the things for me. I felt I was having to diminish what I was doing and shrink back when I'd fought so hard to get to the point where I had a record deal and I had an outlet from the songs that I'd been writing. And so, I mean, there were other things, like just living in each other's pockets and on the road and stuff. And, you know, we should have just taken a break probably, but we decided to call it a day. And some of the songs that I had done for what would have been the third Danny Wilson album became 10 Short Songs About Love, which was my one solo album. Yeah. So I know that there's a Danny Wilson version of St. Jude somewhere. There's, I think there's a Nancy Tell Me Where We Stand. I think there's some kind of acoustic demo with that, you know. But those, my solo album became the album that I wanted to make with Danny Wilson, really. And even the Danny Wilson guys played on it as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I think one of the things that really struck me with the Meet Danny Wilson album, it was kind of out of step with what was going on at the time. You know, I mean, what struck me, what really impressed me was obviously you've talked a little bit about your influences. But you can hear different influences, different bands in there, and the orchestration, the arrangements, are just love, you know, and using different instruments, xylophones, accordions, that sort of thing. You mentioned some of the influences. Who would you say were the biggest, out of your contemporaries, are the ones that you admire the most?
Oh, so many, and some for different reasons, really. But the big, massive, obvious one that everybody notices in my stuff is Steely Dan. That was a breakthrough for me because they had the musical sophistication that I was hearing in my dad's jazz records, but they had this whole rock thing going on as well. So Stevie Wonder was actually massive for me as a kind of emotional songwriter, but also, again, very deeply musical, you know. And the vocals, of course, are incredible. And then the touches of those 60s things, like I mentioned before, the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson's sense of harmony, and I loved Tom Waits. So some of that stuff with the xylophones and everything kind of comes from that area. As a songwriter, Randy Newman was huge for me growing up. But, you know, you kind of fall into the trap of saying the same ones all the time. The fact is that even as a band, we were really open and eclectic and listened to a lot of music, from classical music to jazz, and tried to kind of put it all in there and keep the center of it being my songwriting, if you like, and my voice was kind of the point where it all meets, and then the freedom could be around that, you know. That was the plan anyway.
I think what I identified with is exactly what you just said is, you know, my father was a Glenn Miller fan. My mother liked a lot of pop and easy listening. And then my brother was 7 years older than me, and he was listening to all sorts of stuff like Cream and, you know, so I had this real mixture. So I think I really identified with the album, probably a similar sort of upbringing, you know.
Very similar.
Yeah, very similar to it. Steely Dan, probably one of my favorite bands as well, you know. So, I mean, songs like Five Friendly Aliens, you hear that come through those sort of songs. Do you find the process of writing easy?
No, I still don't. I think I could probably write songs a lot quicker than I do, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I like to try every way that something could be or could work. And sometimes a song will come really quickly, like you mentioned Five Friendly Aliens. That was written in the studio when we were recording it, just because they had such a beautiful piano, and I was just learning piano. And I was banging out that thing, and I just got really excited with the idea of doing something. I also wanted to do something where me and my brother sang harmony all the way through the song, and that was kind of what did that on that. And then Second Summer of Love, which was on the second album, was literally written in my head on a walk from my girlfriend's flat to this shop on the corner and then back again, and I had to sort of grab a guitar and go, what's that, you know.
What did you go to the shop for, Gary? What were you buying, a bag of nuts or something?
Actually, I remember the day really well because it was one of those. It was one of those days where we were still doing a lot of press, and so the three of us had to gather around a phone and do phone press and stuff all day, and we couldn't leave. We were just really exasperated, and between one call, I said, "Look, why don't I run to the shop and I'll get us just some chocolate and stuff like that, and nuts and things. And then if I miss the front of the thing, I'll just jump on." You know? So that was literally, that's how quick it was. And but that's an exception, is what I was going to say. Is like writing that stuff that. Do you know who Dan Wilson is? He from Semitonic. Dan Wilson told me that he wrote "Secret Smile," which was their big hit.
Big hit, yeah.
In a dream, and he actually woke up and he could still remember and just had to jam it into his not what would have been a dictaphone or something at the time, you know. But they're the rare ones where they come like that. I think that there's a lot of finessing. Yeah, Second Summer of Love was the one that I wrote on the walk.
Yeah, sorry, because I've 5 Friendly Aliens. I'm always, where the hell does that song title come from? You know? What is that about?
Yeah, you wouldn't write that in Dundee, you know. I don't know.
I got a personal story for you, which I don't know. We mentioned Colin earlier. Back in, I don't know when it was, in the 80s and 90s, I moved to London to be with my girlfriend. My intention was to marry her, you know. Suffice to say that didn't quite go to plan. But I was living with Colin at the time in Croydon, and when she dumped me, she dedicated Broken China to me. And now, listening to it again, which I did the other day, I totally understand how, in fact, I should have been dedicating it to her.
That song is another kind of anomaly in a way, because it's the only song on the Danny Wilson stuff that I didn't write for myself to sing. There was I had a very brief publishing deal when I was on the first trip to London, and they basically asked me to write. I can't even remember who it was, but it was like it was a female singer. It was somebody like Dusty Springfield or something. Were looking for songs, and I kind of wanted to try my hand at writing for other people, which of course I do a lot more now, but at the time I'd never done anything like that. So I wrote that song, it got rejected. And then when it came to doing the Danny Wilson record, I was like, I still like that song, you know. So it wasn't written for me.
That's a beautiful song. It's a very, very emotionally traumatic song, depending on the circumstances, but a beautiful song nonetheless. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Mary's Prayer. Funny enough, Tony and I now, sorry to say this to you, Gary Clark, yeah, but Tony and I, we got a covers band, and one of the songs we're doing is Mary's Prayer.
Keep it alive.
Which is a fantastic. I can't sing. Could never sing it the way you sing it, but I sing it slightly lower key, I think, actually. But anyway, we love the song. And another question you've been asked a million times before, but just for those people who don't know, including me, who was Mary?
Well, I mean, I just used the name Mary because at the time what I was doing was in lyrics. I was using a lot of stuff from my Catholic upbringing, you know.
Okay.
I liked the sound of those words that were in all those hymns, you know, these mostly Victorian hymns and in the Bible and stuff. And I wasn't using them in a religious way. I was using them as like a painter uses a paintbrush or a tool, really. I like the way they sounded, and I like the way that they glorified love. And I'd written about 2 songs before that, using that kind of style, and then I wrote Mary's Prayer. But the emotion of Mary's Prayer is very true. It's just about regret, when you lose somebody and you look back and go like, you know, what could I have done different to, you know.
Was it at all autobiographical?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think anybody
okay.
Somebody lost regrets, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can really do a song. Well, I don't anyway. Like a song like that that's so emotional and emotionally raw. I think that's what it connects. That's what it connects.
Yeah.
You know. There's got to have some element of truth in it. I mean, I always sort of joke songwriters need to have had their heart broken at least once and broke somebody's heart at least once. You know.
Yeah, exactly. You won the Ivor Novello award for that as well, didn't you, for that song?
It was nominated, it didn't win.
Okay, I think there's but you know,
Sting won.
Did he? Hard.
And I don't mind telling you, I was sitting next to Lamont Dozier at the awards.
Yeah.
And when Sting won,
Oh,
Lamont Dozier went over to me and he went, "Man, you should have won that. Your song's much better." So I won it in the Lamont Dozier department.
Brilliant.
There's a plaque for Ivor Novello in Cardiff Town, isn't there? Is that right? I'm thinking that?
Yeah, one of the houses. I think he was born. I think.
Yeah.
You've won several awards, of course, over the years, and these days you write for film, TV, you write for other people. You know, you're doing lots of different stuff. And as a producer, you've been quite successful. Who was the producer of the Danny Wilson albums? Why was that person sort of central to what you did? Maybe.
Well, the first album is two producers mainly. We started the record with a young producer called Howard Gray, and Howard was influential in like introducing us to the Lester Bowie's Brass Fantasy, all the horn stuff and things.
Oh yeah.
And he's kind of like, we did that in a studio in the middle of the countryside in Denmark. And weirdly, you mentioned the xylophones and stuff earlier on, but the Danish National Orchestra had been recording there just before us, and they'd left behind all these orchestral instruments. And so we asked if we could rent the instruments. And so for a small fee, we got them to leave the instruments there for like another couple of weeks. And they had things like bass marimbas and stuff. So that was really influential, that period, on the kind of sound of the band. And then when we got back to London, the record company sort of loved probably about half of the album, but were concerned that we'd been kind of bored of Mary's Prayer by then, and that the original demo of Mary's Prayer sounded very much like the same arrangement as you all know, you know. But we'd been bored of it and started messing around with it and put pedal steel guitar on it and all kinds of stuff. And it wasn't, you know, we kind of lost the immediate hit factor because we were just so bored of it. And so they wanted to do us to do a version that was closer to the demo that everyone had loved. So we went into the studio with a guy called Dave Bascom, who I still work with to this day. He's one of the best mixers in the world. Like, he mixed Sing Street Broadway cast album for me really recently. And he I think brought the pop back. When I say pop, like Dave had such a great radio kind of sound. Like the minimalism of Mary's Prayer is very Dave, you know, that punchiness and the clarity. And so we ended up going, oh, wait a minute, that sounds amazing. Let's redo some of the other songs with Dave. So the main producers on that album were Howard and Dave, and it's kind of a game of two halves. And then the second album was produced by us with a guy called Fred DeFay, and was actually originally started from the demos in Scotland with a guy called Alan McGlone. And we actually asked Alan, who was kind of the guy who had a local studio here, if he wanted to come to London with us and continue on with Fred. But and he came for a week or something like that, but he wasn't comfortable with somebody else being in the seat that he'd been occupying. So Fred then kind of took over from there, and it was just like a co-production between us and Fred.
We're big football fans. I don't know whether you're a football fan. We want to know, you Dundee or Dundee United, neither?
I grew up in a Dundee United family. Tends to be family orientated here, but I'm not really a football fan, to be honest. My twin brother is a real serious football fan. He's Dundee United all the way. I've got to fly the orange and black for the family.
Okay, yeah. Is it? I don't know how big the rivalry is in Dundee. Does it get nasty between those sides at all?
It's relatively friendly, right?
Yeah. Okay, we're big Cardiff City fans, you know, so as you might expect, because we're in Cardiff. But the reason I'm asking you about that is to do with like producers, and I'm wondering if it's like with footballers who eventually become managers. I wonder if you picked up any kind of ideas on what makes a good producer and what you shouldn't do from the people you work with on the way up, sort of thing.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And but for me, I was always, I sort of see, when I think back to listening to those Steely Dan records and the Stevie Wonder records and stuff, like I remember putting on these headphones in my bedroom and laying on the floor and hearing for the first time stereo and like, oh wow, that guitar's coming from over there, and like this vocal's coming from there, and the horns just came in and over here, and you know, and so the actual how the hell are records made was already in my, I'm just wanted to know everything about it. And so when I was in the studio, and to be fair, Jed and Kit were the same. They had the same hunger, and they're both great producers as well. But I was always watching what they were doing and asking questions, probably being really annoying. Like, but you know, I just wanted, and I had a home studio set up pretty early, and then I had when I did 10 Short Songs About Love, which is the album right after the 2 Danny Wilson albums, I took my advance that normally you would spend in big studios, you know, and I basically said to the label, I want to put a studio into my own flat. So I took that money, and so that's now it's very common because computers have made it really easy to have home, you know, to record at home. But at the time that was a lot less usual. And so I was always interested in it, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then, of course, most recently, well, not that recently, actually 4 years ago, getting into kind of, you're already in it, but Sing Street, you know, I mean, Sing Street taking you into the realm of movies. Nice little story for you, really briefly. My daughter's 16. She would be in sixth form, but of course, you know, that's on hold at the moment. So, and she's got a beautiful singing voice, and she loves music. So I knew I was interviewing you. So I looked through all the usual suspects, Netflix, I couldn't get it. £2.99 comes through the door. I was like, come on, Charlie, come and watch this with me. And we both just totally, absolutely loved it. And can you guess the point where I slightly tried to choke back a little tear? No, didn't want to cry in front of my daughter. The moment in the movie, which, do you remember?
Is it a musical moment, or is it because I find the whole thing with the brother at the end incredible.
Yeah, that's when he gets on the boat.
Yeah.
You know, and heads for London.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's so much truth in that movie, and so much of it relates to, is parallel with my life. The school band thing and everything, and leaving to go to London. But that's very much John Carney, the writer, director, and also my musical collaborator, because John's an amazing songwriter, musician. He based that very much on his own life, and he actually went to Sing Street School, and he took me. So.
Was it spelled the same way with the SYNGE?
SYNGE,
yeah. Okay. And how much is it? There must be little bits. It strikes me there's such a parallel with you. Is there any of you kind of in that, you know, you and your growing up? I mean, Jed the multi-instrumentalist guy and all this stuff. You know, is there any of that in that?
No, the story was written before I came on board, but I was very, very involved in the lyrics. I probably wrote most of the lyrics, and so I was able to kind of draw on that. And then what John is very good at is when I'd write a lyric, he would love a line, or he would see that it was important. I'm trying to think of a good example. Yeah, there's a song called Girls, and it's all the complicated boys. Boys know that the girls are so complicated. And he basically took that line, and at one point there's a little scene with the kid and his art teacher, and his art teacher says, "Oh, the complicated boys and girls." And, you know, that's plant the seed. When you hear the song, you think that's where he got his inspiration. So was it. John's really good at kind of taking the music and weaving it back into the film again, you know. Yeah,
it's just a lovely film. I don't know, just hit me. It just hit a nerve with me. I just really loved it. So you continuing that relationship with John Carney because you work with him on other projects as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we did an Amazon. He did an Amazon TV series called Modern Love. 8 episodes. They're all short episodes. They're like half an hour long, and really quite big stars in it. People like Anne Hathaway and stuff, and Becker. And he asked me to be the executive music producer. So my job was to create score, write songs, commission songs, commission score, you know. And he said to me, I need somebody to do kind of like a music supervisor's job, but I don't really want to hire a traditional music supervisor. And I said, you should speak to my wife, Alison, because for years she's kind of looked after my management, and she is really good at remembering songs from, like, she'll remember a song from that I'd written 10 years ago. Like somebody's looking for something and we'll get a brief through, and she'll go, oh, you know, it'd be great for that. And she'll just remember. Whereas my head's like, just, you know, and I don't remember them at all. And he said, oh, okay, that's a good idea. So she spoke to him first, and then she spoke to Amazon, and then they hired her as music supervisor. She'd never done it before. So basically the whole of the music for Modern Love was done from our house here in Scotland, you know. I mean, we recorded elsewhere. We recorded in New York, recorded in Dublin, recorded stuff here. But yeah, it took almost a year. It was a massive project.
How does that kind of work for you as a songwriter? It's interesting you say that with your wife remembering songs. Can you sometimes retake a song and kind of change the key or change the arrangement or take parts out of it, and then you can use that, you know, for a new format for stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I recycle bits of songs sometimes, particularly when I'm writing a song on my own. I'll quite often, and I keep a lot of, it used to be dictaphone tapes, but they're now like you just do it on your phone. But you know, a song that I start working on and I think I've got a good chorus or whatever, and I never quite finish it, that chorus might become the melody of the bridge of another song or whatever. I'm quite, you know, that sometimes happens. It gets more complicated when there's a number of songwriters on a song, obviously.
Yes.
Right. If you just want to use a little bit of it, you've got to call them up and say, remember that song that was never released that 3 of us wrote? Well, I want to use this bit, but I want to write it for this person, or what, you know. It just gets more complicated.
Because you collaborated with so many different people. I mean, a couple of people spring to mind for me that I kind of admire and look up to. Boo Howardine being one, and Lloyd Cole being another. You know, very different people, but both the people again with that kind of musical integrity. Have you got any kind of recollections of working with either of those guys at all? Yeah,
I mean, there was a period that I worked with Boo a lot when I was living in London and he was living in Cambridge, and we gigged together. And I mean, he's just a world-class songwriter. So I think we learned a lot off of each other, like different styles. He's a very fast writer, Boo. Boo writes tons and tons of songs. And so we've got a slightly different approach to it. I'm not saying one's better or worse, it's just the way it is. Lloyd, again, is very exacting about, he will work a song for months and months. And in that case, it was through my publisher at the time, and he said that Lloyd was open to doing some collaborations. I'd met Lloyd before, and we got on really well, but we never talked about working together. And then he hooked us up, and I went out to New York, and we worked on about 3 songs, and what I got was, I left New York thinking none of this is going anywhere, because Lloyd just would not finish anything, and he wasn't really letting me in on lyrics, and I just thought it was a disaster trip, waste of money. And then as it happened, like one of the songs, he ended up not just putting it on 1 album, but he put it on 3 albums, something. So he must have liked something. So.
Yeah, I saw him recently when he was touring in Guildford with my wife, because we both like Lloyd Cole. He's a really witty, funny guy, isn't he?
Love him. My favourite memory of that is actually just sitting in a whiskey bar in New York with Lloyd, just sipping whiskey and just laughing for hours. You know?
Yeah, I bet. There's nothing wrong with that, is there? I wanted to ask you a little bit, I know because you've had a long career in music now, you know. How do you think your songwriting style has evolved over the years? You know, you've done so much.
Well, I was through the kind of period where I was much more, which is quite a long period, which is kind of after my artist stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of crossed into writing and producing for other people. One of the things that I wanted at that point was to keep my radar open to any kind of influences in modern music, to be able to be flexible enough to work with a lot of different artists and to be able to make contemporary sounding records and not lose touch with what was going on at the time. And so that was a kind of real period, a long period of learning and experimentation and working in different styles. I mean, I did stuff that was rock, I did rap records, I did pop, I did like all kind of, country. I did loads of different stuff. And so that was I kind of see that now as a kind of period of education in a way, even though I was kind of still making a living and making music. And then when I came out the other end of that and I got into where I'm at now, which is film, television, I'm working on another musical at the moment.
Yes.
I've actually been able to kind of, I feel like I'm at a best of both worlds kind of point, where I'm able to draw on that kind of freedom that I had as a writer when I was a kid and draw on all that stuff that I learned in that period. But I'm really at a point where I'm realizing my own mortality and that I haven't got that many years of songwriting left to go. And what's really become what's come massive for me is actual just my perfectionism has gotten out of control, really, in the sense that, I know that there is such a thing as technical perfection in a song. Obviously, you can take the soul out of the song, you've got to be careful of that. But I also know that when something isn't quite right, that you've got to really work it. And that's a bit of that's kind of heroes like Leonard Cohen have that kind of approach of, a song is ready when he thinks that's the best he can possibly make it. Take 2 years song sometimes.
Beautiful songwriter. Tony and I, by the way, another song we've been working on, Ricky Dan Luz and Nambino, Steely Dan. Now, I don't connect with Steely Dan as much as all three of my best mates who I'm still kind of doing music with, because for me, when you talk about it getting it perfectly right, for me, sometimes Steely Dan may have got lost in that, getting it kind of too right. Do you know what I mean? It becomes kind of too complex and polished. I don't know. I shouldn't criticize Steely Dan.
For me, I understand why it does. I mean, the other criticism that people say about Steely Dan is that the music is cold and intellectual, and I don't feel it like that at all. I feel it like there's a lot of soul in that music. It's just these two New York Jewish guys trying to work out how to do it their own way, and there's a lot of, I agree, there's a lot of perfectionism in it, but that's kind of what makes it. That's part of its appeal for me. I understand that different people, it doesn't work for everybody.
I'm sure Tony would have an opinion on that, wouldn't you, Tom?
Yeah.
Come on, Tony.
Gary, I've been trying to educate him for so long about Steely Dan. I keep dropping hints by sending him, have a listen to this song, have a listen to this song. It's not all like that,
Start on the early records.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think he probably would like some of the earlier stuff. But, I mean, Donald Fagen's solo albums and Walter Becker's solo albums are, great to listen to as well. Did you ever come across did you come across Fagen or Becker at all?
In life, you mean?
In life, yeah.
Well, there was a period when Walter Becker was producing, that big gap when Steely Dan stopped making records for a while. Walter Becker was working as a producer from his place in Hawaii.
Yeah.
We were on the same label as China Crisis, and he produced that album of, what's it called?
Flaunt the Imperfection.
Good man. It's a great record, actually, with Black McPhee on it and stuff. Yeah. And so our A&R guy at the record label had just been working with Walter Becker when we were about to make the second Danny Wilson album. So it was suggested that we work with him, and obviously he's a superhero of ours, but we also knew that it was too close, that it was going to paint us far too much in the Steely Dan box. And it just, it just instinctively felt wrong. So we turned that down.
Yeah. It's probably a wise thing to do, because it's exactly as you said, perhaps it was a little bit too close in the style,
Yeah, an amazing experience, but we were, at that point we were keen to, and you've got to remember, for the first year of our lives, we'd been doing interviews and stuff that we'd never to do that before, and Steely Dan came up a lot. So we were like, you know, what we don't want to do is be the B-list Steely Dan. You know, when you're that age, you don't want to be somebody else's shadow.
No, that's one of the problem, isn't it? The influences overtaking, and you know, you just could compare to them all the time. I mean, I can obviously hear that influence, but I hear lots of other things. Burt Bacharach, you know, people like that, John Barry, you know, all different composers, Beach Boys in particular as well, Pet Sounds, that sort of thing, as you mentioned earlier on. But it could be a real danger, like you say, to get pigeonholed in one area.
I think as well, my voice is of a similar range to Donald Fagen's, and so that kind of has that effect as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think we made the right decision. You know.
Definitely, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the Blinding Heights record label.
Oh, yeah.
Still going on, is it? Are you still working on that?
It's basically there for me to use to do whatever projects that I feel right. Blinding Heights. The only thing that we did 4 singles with a band called Heights, which is where I got the name from, because we actually had a song called Blinding Heights. They got the name from that as well. And then they got signed by Warner's, and so they're no longer going through Blinding Heights. And I've just been so busy because I got involved in the Sing Street Broadway stage version.
Yeah.
I was in New York right up until the COVID thing happened in March, mid-March, and I had to fly home. But I was getting all this, as I say, I've got another musical that I've been working on.
Yeah.
And when they gave me the opportunity to go and work on Sing Street, I thought, I am going to learn so much from this that I've got to do it. You know, it just felt like, and it really, I mean, I just felt blessed to be able to do it, you know. And ironically, with the COVID thing, I'm used to working a lot on my own, but then in small teams, you know, 2, 3, 4 people maybe. But I don't tend to produce bands. There's other guys that do that. When I say bands, I mean like electric bands. I tend to work with solo artists and duos and stuff. And so it's usually a small team of people. And then suddenly, for the first time in my life, I was working in a rehearsal room with, you know, 50, 60 people every day.
Yeah.
And then COVID hits. So it was so ironic. It was like bizarre. You know.
Well, I can't imagine what it was like. I mean, when I watched that movie the day I was saying to Charlie, I imagine, you know, I told her I was interviewing you, and how pleased I was to be able to do that. And I said, I'm just imagine Gary, you know, sitting there at the kind of, you know, the premiere of that movie, and then hearing it all come back and seeing it with an audience. Did you go through that? Was that, you know, and also for the stage version as well, I guess?
Yeah, both. Yeah. And the first time, you see, when I did the music for Sing Street, there was a period, I didn't know about this because even though I'd had songs in films, there were songs that already existed being put into films, whereas this was, when we left the studio, they started shooting because they need the music first so people can mind it or whatever, you know. And so there was a period of shooting which was relatively short, but it was, you know, 4, 5, 6 months, something like that. And I was onto something else, but I did go to a couple of the shoots. So John invited me. I went and watched them film and Drive It Like You Stole It and stuff. And but then they go into a period of putting the movie into all the festivals to try and get reviews before they can get a general release and all this. And it felt to me like I thought this movie's never going to come out. And that's really what I was starting to think. I was starting to think, I don't think it's going to come out. I said it to my wife, and I was wrong. But the first time I saw it in a cinema was, you know, a year and a half or something after we made it. And they started to play it to private audiences for John to get feedback. He was still editing, actually. He was still able to edit at that point. And I sat in the cinema, and there was a lot of young people because he was really interested in what young people thought about it, and young theatre goers, cinema goers, free tickets. And so I sat and watched it, and my fear was that I was going to be too myopic, like thinking about, oh, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd done this. But actually, he's such a great filmmaker that I was just carried through it along with a film, just as if I was watching it or as if you were watching it. And I found it funny and moving and all that stuff, you know. So I was able to watch it just as maybe the distance and time had been good in a way as well.
What about the stage version? I mean, I don't know. I've never been to America. I've never been to New York. I can imagine what Broadway's like, but it's the epitome of showbiz in the stage, you know, a kind of stage sense. I imagine there's some quite interesting characters in that world. So when you're writing these songs and you got all this big production stuff, is it, you know, that must be quite a kind of I wouldn't say intimidating, but I suppose a different kind of experience.
Yeah, it was a huge learning curve. And I think they were a bit nervous that I didn't have any theatre background. And I also brought in, as my right-hand man, I brought in somebody else who didn't have any theatre background, which is Davey, who plays with Depeche Mode. But he's a great, just all-round musician and songwriter. And I knew that he'd be a good person to have at my side. But they put it on what they call off-Broadway first. The New York Theatre Workshop had it on for 3 months. And it was sold out every night, but that's like a 200-seat theatre. And then through that, we got the Broadway release. And in between those two things, you kind of take stock of what needs to be fixed from off-Broadway. And that's when they brought me back in, because they felt, I think, that they'd lost a little bit of the spirit of the movie. And one of the things about musical theatre is there's a tendency to use all the cast singing all the time, and not all the time, but Sing Street. One of the things that I saw when I watched it at New York Theatre Workshop was we're losing the heart. The heart of this thing is about this boy and his band, and that's his escape from all the oppression at school, at home, the divorce of his parents, all that stuff. And I just wanted to refocus it back on the band. And so I'm not saying other people don't sing, they do, but I kind of just really went, let's focus on that. And I rehearsed the band like I would rehearse a rock band in a rock and roll rehearsal space, and no sheet music in front of them. And I mean, that paid dividends. And then all of that's done with a pretty poor sound and stuff in these rehearsal spaces with full cast, and you get just little slithers of time for music, and you need to plan ahead the next day. It's very disciplined. Like, you know that you've got an hour, and you go, we've got to work on that bit of underscore. We've got to tighten up this song. We've got this new song, you know, and you've got to really, because you have to call the actors that are needed. Because if you call somebody and then don't use them, that's wrong. And then if you don't call them, you can't call them at the last minute. Unlike in a rock and roll situation, it's just like ether, you know. And so that discipline, I had to learn that really, really quickly. Once you get it, it's fine. But the first day that we got into the theatre is what they call Tech Day 1. Like, so there's no audience, but basically it's the first time you hear it through the PA system in the theatre. And it sounded, all the work that we'd done in these horrible sounding rooms, it sounded amazing, right? And I was just like, oh my God, thank God it's working, you know. And the sound guy that we'd chosen was incredible, Pete Hylinski. And we were just so excited. And then we got, the news started to come through on people's mobile phones that this COVID thing was affecting Broadway. And then we got word that the producers wanted to call a meeting for 4 o'clock that afternoon. And the only place that we could fit everybody on was actually on the stage. So it was actually on the Broadway stage where they had to announce. And you got to remember, most of them are kids in this show. So very first time they're appearing on Broadway. They get to stand on the stage and play through the PA, and then they get told in the same afternoon to go home. You know, it was heartbreaking. And you know, I pray that we can get it all back together again. The producers have been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, at some stage we'll have some version of normal, hopefully, and we'll be able to have a shared experience again, because that's kind of a lot of what it's about, isn't it? Sharing that kind of experience. Leading you on to what you're doing, kind of working on, I guess you're working on it sort of now, today, at the moment, with Emma Thompson, with Nanny McPhee. It was quite a kind of, what's the story about how that came about? You know, because I guess she wasn't one of your ongoing pals initially.
No, it didn't come through Emma. It came through one of the producers, it's a joint production, as was the film, between Working Title, who are in London, and Three Strange Angels, who are in LA. And Three Strange Angels is a lady called Lindsay Durand. And Lindsay saw Sing Street, the movie, loved it, and thought she loved the music and thought that I might be right for the Nanny McPhee thing. I believe they'd tried a couple of other composers and it wasn't quite working. And then Lindsay called me. And I'll be honest with you, my first reaction was, I need to watch the movie again. I'd seen it, but I had to watch it again. And I was like, I don't know if this is right for me, just tonally. I just couldn't quite feel, what does this music sound like? And then Emma spends a lot of time in Scotland. Her family have a place in Dunoon on the west coast. And so I got a call from her directly saying, can we just have a chat about this and have a walk? By that time, I'd been sort of thinking about, like, how do you capture the colours and stuff in the atmosphere of that film? And I was thinking again about Tom Waits and, you know, and certain kinds of pop music. But it has a slightly dark flavour. And so I went and met her and we walked around the hills of Dunoon. And it's just happened that we were really on the same page. We were talking the same language, like circus instruments and stuff. And she then handed me like 3 or 4 lyrics, handwritten and kind of half finished, but there was sometimes too much as well. And I took them away and I wrote a couple of songs with those lyrics, handed them in, and they loved it. And that's probably about 3 years ago now. She's obviously got to continue making movies and all these things, and I've had other things on as well. I've had to do Modern Love in the middle of that. So it's been kind of an on-off situation. And then COVID's, that's the one blessing in my life is actually given me time to really focus on it again. So I'm probably 4 or 5 songs from the end, and I'm just concentrating on that every day now, really.
So what would you see the target audience for that as being? Is there like a demographic for that?
I think Nanny McPhee is going to be pretty wide, I think, because you can bring, I mean, originally, I mean, the movie's quite wide. Adults love it. There's a lot of in jokes for the adults, the kids, and obviously it's going to be musically. Well, you have to wait and hear the music, but I think it's really cool.
I Tony, I kind of actually imagine, you know, how the hell do you know, write Nanny McPhee, let's write a song, you know.
Well, now, one of the wonders of theatre and film is that actually, and TV, is that actually you have a script. So
you got the brief, yeah.
You know what the characters are going through, you know where they're at, you know how they get from A to B, and some of the stuff that actually, in that way, it's slightly easier than sitting down to write a song from scratch, you know. You know, you've got a bit of a map.
I guess sometimes you submit stuff and then they either don't like it at all, or you got to rework it, and you go through all that process, do you? Yeah.
Sometimes they need to hear a song to realize that the idea for the song wasn't right. You know, that can be slightly frustrating, but I'm sort of used to the process. They, you know, in the sense that they'll say, "Oh, Mr. Brown should be singing this to the kids at this particular time." And I'll go, "Okay, take that away, work on that, record it, do a whole demo, sing all the stuff on it and everything." Because I sing all the parts. I mean, Emma sometimes comes in and does bits, but and then you hand it in and they go, "Oh, maybe you shouldn't be saying that."
Yeah, you need to have a certain kind of personality, I suppose, to be able to, you know, to deal with that diplomatically, I suppose.
I think when you've worked in pop music for the length of time that I have, rejection is second nature. You know.
I mean, there was some. Sorry, Gary.
You've just got to learn from it, really.
Yeah.
What I will say that, with the benefit of a little bit of breathing space, once you get over the disappointment of something like that, and then you get the song that's right for it.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a time that I haven't went, actually, this is much better, you know. So it's all a matter of just kind of slowly building it and getting it better and better. And there's a lot of music as well in a, you know, a show like that's quite quite a long tour.
I mean, you wrote a lot of songs for, well, you wrote some songs certainly for Sing Street that in the end weren't used either. So, you know, you got a catalog, I suppose.
There was one, but it's actually gone into the Broadway production.
Oh, cool. Okay. So it has a life. It's there. Good.
Yeah.
Tony, you had a couple of other things you wanted to ask Gary, didn't you?
Yeah, just out of interest, really. I mean, when you first started playing, was it guitar was the first thing that you picked up rather than piano? And you know, maybe you could relate to us like your favorite guitar or some like the guitar that you always go to.
I'm a bit of a guitar nut, actually. I collect guitars. I guess because when I was a kid, I used to go to the shops, the music stores. I walked around the 3 music stores every Saturday. I just look at the guitars, and they knew I couldn't afford them, so they would frown on me playing them. But I think I went overboard when I could eventually afford them. You know? But I learned on guitar. We never had nobody was really musical in my household. Mum and dad. So we never had a piano or anything. I learned piano kind of taking it from the guitar. I'd already written a lot of the Danny Wilson songs. And I ended up playing piano on the records. And I literally taught myself to play piano by going, well, what is this chord? And then playing it, okay, that. And then it made kind of musical sense. And the piano's interesting because it's laid out for you, the black notes and the white notes.
Yeah. I
kind of learned piano later, and I now write just as much on keyboards as I do on guitar. But guitar's still my passion. I like to, even in the COVID, I built a Stratocaster and stuff. And I just like, but Gretches I've still got right beside me. I've got the Danny. This is the.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, lovely.
And
can you see mine behind me, Gary? I got a Gretsch behind me somewhere.
I noticed it. You don't think I was going to miss that, do you?
Not as flash as yours, but lovely guitars, aren't they?
Is that what it called?
Electromatic, is it? I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a non manual version of that. Yeah. Nice guitars.
I think
lovely
you were
looking
using.
too.
I think you were using the Gretsch when I saw you in Bristol years ago in Danny Wilson. And I'm sure you were playing it then, and I thought at the time, wow, that's a cool looking guitar.
Yeah, that'd be that one. I had a Strat before that, and we were on tour in America, touring the first album, opening for Simply Red, and we got to L.A. and we were staying at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, and all the guitar shops are just down the hill from that, like you can walk a 2-minute walk. And Chris Mara, who was the other guitarist in the live band, came up and he said, "Oh, you've got to come and see this old Gretsch." And went down and saw it, and I couldn't afford it. I remember exactly what it was. It was $999, and I was just talking about it, and my manager overheard it, and he said, "You know what? I'll get it for you, and then you could pay me back as the tour goes on." So basically, I paid him back in installments each time. Got PDs or whatever, and that became like my main. The orange Gretsch is.
Do you prefer to write on an acoustic or electric, or does it not matter? Or
write acoustic, yeah, or piano, as I say.
I think I don't know if you think the same, but I suppose a lot of people have said that if it works on acoustic, it's gonna work. You know, start off with an acoustic.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the technology has now allowed us to work in many different ways. So sometimes I might just have an idea for a groove or a beat or something. So I'll start that actually on the computer and then just start singing things against it. But I still write a lot just on instruments, you know, and mainly acoustic guitar because I know my way around the guitar, but piano as well.
Which acoustic do you use?
Oh, it's actually in its case at the moment because it's in a bit of pain. I've got 2. My main writing guitar is a Larrivee, but it's been got 2 huge cracks in it at the moment. I travelled with it quite a lot, and I think the variance in humidity going from different places has really messed with it. I bought it new probably about, oh God, it's got to be 15 years at least now, but in London, and is just such an easy guitar to play. The neck on it feels like an electric guitar. So it's really comfortable for long hours writing. You're sometimes playing a guitar for hours. And so that was kind of my favorite writing guitar. And then I've got a little Martin 00018 that's from 1966 or something. And that kind of gets a different gig. I kind of use that more for finger picking and stuff. It's really got this beautiful kind of articulation, but it's a small bodied guitar, so it's not that small. But
yeah.
That looks kind of like the size of the guitar you've got behind you there.
This one here? Yeah, that one. The one at the back?
No, the one beside David Bowie and the other.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Johnny's, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's Taylor, yeah.
It's like that kind of size, parallel or whatever.
See, I interrupted Tony.
Next to David Bowie, yeah.
See,
that's a beautiful. That's great.
Because a huge influence on me, by the way. I keep forgetting to mention David Bowie.
Oh right, yeah. Let's talk about Bowie. Yeah.
Huge influence on me. Massive.
It's funny because I remember having a double album where you had the extra live tracks on there, and you did a superb version of "Knowing Me, Knowing You."
Oh yeah.
And Cooks, of course, which I've noticed that is that something you do with the Modern Love stuff as well?
Yeah, there's an episode where these two gay guys adopt a baby, and at the end you see them 3 years later, and now she's a young girl, and they're tucking her in to say goodnight. And we tried a load of different songs and nothing was quite working. And again, it was Alison. Alison said, "What about Cooks?" And I looked into using the Danny Wilson version. The David Bowie version was just going to be too expensive, you know. And then I looked into the Danny Wilson version, and nobody could locate the master. And so I basically just recut an acoustic version of it in here, just with acoustic guitars and a mandolin and stuff. So it's it's an updated take on it.
So you would count Bowie as a big influence as well?
Massive. Probably my 3 albums. It's kind of I got them. They were all given to me for free. This is why I kind of come back to these 3 albums. It's just a weird accident, but my younger cousin gave me 2 albums that she just didn't listen to, and one was Stevie Wonder's Inner Visions. The other one was Hunky Dory with David Bowie. And then my girlfriend's brother in 1977 had bought Asia, and he said to me, "You'll like this shite," you know. Threw it at me across the room, and I went back, put it on in my little bedroom at the time, and dropped the needle on, and Black Cow started with that amazing riff, and I was just like, oh. But Inner Visions, Hunky Dory, Asia, they're probably my cornerstone albums if pushed. You know.
Isn't it amazing when you find that album that's an absolute influence on you? You know, it kind of changes your life, isn't it? You know, I mean, I had that kind of moment with Ziggy Stardust, you know, and as soon as I heard Ziggy Stardust, I thought, well, I want to do something in music. You know, it just it was something more than just music. It actually had this sort of feeling inside of me. I thought, well, I want to be involved. You know, this is something special. You know,
absolutely. I mean, I certain songs, like I think about Inner Visions and when Stevie Wonder's singing "Don't You Worry About a Thing," the way that used to make me feel. A time in your life when you're probably 14 years old, you've got all those hormones, and everything seems difficult, even though, like, from a perspective, it doesn't. You know, you can go shut up, but like, your whole world seems really difficult. Your girlfriend has left you. Somebody's picking on you at school. It's Sing Street again, really. You know.
Yeah.
But that period in your time, a period of time in your life when music is your escape from everything. It means
absolutely
more. It's a massive, massive thing. You know? I try to keep that. Try to keep that memories, and part of what goes into the music as well. That amount of.
Yeah, it's so important, I think, yeah.
Tony, you wanted to ask Gary the question, which you mentioned to me earlier, which I thought was a great question, the one about the desire for the song? Remember?
No.
Okay. He said, I don't know whether you can answer this question, but it's a great question. I thought it was a great question if you don't remember. Is there a song you kind of wish you'd written?
Ah, right. No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was.
It's a great
gonna ask
question.
you,
I don't know if there's an answer. I don't know.
There's probably too many of them, but the thing I always know when a song's really get me, because it's a kind of mixture of love and jealousy. Like I get this, and I do have a soft spot for when people can do something in a very concise way. You know, economy is a huge thing. Like when you look at it and you just go, how did he get that, or she get that down to like 10 lines that kill you, you know? So, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of something off the top of my head.
Sure. You'll probably think of them later.
Yeah, well.
But
thinking about it for the rest of the day. Ruined my life.
This is a great question, but I did think I wasn't sure you.
If you'd have warned me beforehand, I would have thought of it.
Yeah. Now you've been asked this question a million times. I know you're back in Dundee now, so I suppose you're kind of in touch more with people that you've played with over the years. Any chance whatsoever of any more Danny Wilson gigs or solo performances as yourself, or getting out there and playing?
When they opened the V&A Museum here, I tried to do it with Danny Wilson, but couldn't. Jed is now a member of Simple Minds, and they tour constantly. So Jed couldn't do it. So I never call something Danny Wilson when it isn't the three of us, the three core members. But it's obviously much more likely to happen now that we're all officially in one place, even though we're locked in our bedrooms. But the problem's not the desire to play together. We all still love one another and love playing together and stuff. And any wounds that were there are completely healed. So it is definitely possible. The problem is just people's schedules, getting everybody together. And it would, but I never say never, because it would be great fun to do it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a festival, maybe a big festival. It'd be quite a special thing, wouldn't it?
I mean, yeah, it's in terms of size of venue and stuff. I always remember loving playing places. You were mentioning the church that you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's a place in Edinburgh called Queen's Hall. Whenever we played there, there's a sort of size. I think it's about 300 or 400 people where you get this feeling that everybody can see and touch, and you can feel the audience and everything. I think would be more tempted to do something for the love rather than be on a big festival with a big load of bands. It's kind of,
Tony, did you have a final one?
Yeah, final question. If you had the opportunity to work with anybody from any era, is there anybody that you would like to choose that you would have loved to work with? You know, either alive, dead, whatever. You know, is there somebody in particular?
Yeah, I mean the big one for me, and he's gone, and it's kind of for my dad, would be Sinatra. I'd love to hear. Sinatra used to sing things like George Harrison's Something or whatever. He would take pop songs and Sinatrify them, you know. And I always had a bit of I would have loved to hear Sinatra sing. I'm not no particular song, but or write something for him. But obviously that's not going to happen.
No, one of the greats. So.
But I grew up with that voice, and I still consider him to be one of the best storytellers in a song that ever lived.
Yeah. Well, Gary, it's been a long interview, but it's been absolutely fantastic from my point of view. I hope you've enjoyed talking through stuff.
Enjoyed it very much, guys, and hopefully you know how to edit film.
Yeah, well, there might be a couple. There might be a couple of edits, but thank you, Gary, very, very much.
Thanks,
very well. Great to speak. And look after yourself in this crazy time, and we'll talk soon.